We see culture everywhere we go, from our languages to the foods we eat and the way our families are structured. It is a main component of our lives, but it is something that we struggle to define. Dictionary.com states that culture is the sum total of ways of living built up by a group of human beings and transmitted from one generation to another. However, this definition is not universally agreed on as the sole meaning of culture.
So, what is culture? Culture is shared experiences among a group of people throughout generations that defines the individuals within the group that makes them unique. Aspects of culture, such as languages, values, norms, beliefs, and practices, are incorporated into daily life and shape individuals into who they are today.
However, culture can't be too complicated. The dictionary only needed one sentence to explain what it was. If culture is so complicated and broad, how can we simply live our lives in culture unknowingly? Culture is only as complicated as we make it out to be. Throughout history, culture has evolved into what we see around the world today. New cultures might be created all the time, but when we can't determine the uniqueness of a group of people solely based on culture alone. Groups of people can be different but have similar culture, and have similar culture but be completely different. It's that simple. It's just people and how they live their daily lives.
I see where you're coming from, but you're thinking more about the word culture and not what culture actually means to a human being. Think of it this way. We named a few aspects to culture already, but they were all things, items, or tangible objects. Culture is more than just what the eye can see. Culture is about feelings, memories, it's about emotions. This is what makes culture so complex and relative to both individuals and populations. There's no physical link between people and culture. There are physically things that are part of culture or remind us of culture, but these things themselves are not culture. In this sense, culture is something very dependent on the mind rather than the body. While some view it as being determined by skin color, place of origin, or the way a person dresses, they forget that the capacity for it is completely biological. As stated in an article written in 2011, while culture is the cognitive system which enables us to generate much of our behavior, and presumably ultimately involves a set of biologically based cognitive processes, the product is something else entirely. The human capacity for culture has resulted in enormous diversity at the population level, so that we can recognize that the way in which humans form cultures is as important in evolutionary terms as the capacity for culture itself.
So instead of seeing culture as something dependent on the mind and biology of humans, there is another school of thought which claims that culture is reliant on the size of the human population. Cultural evolution has been successful in humans because of the size of the human population and the way that our species is connected with each other. If the human population was smaller, it would be hard for new versions of culture to form. And without the ability to see a new culture, it would be impossible for humans to see new ideals that could be brought back to their own cultures. With all this combination between cultures, how could someone say that culture makes a group of people unique? Cultural evolution has thrived because of the size and connectability of the human race, and has contributed greatly to the survival of the human species. Culture is also created based on the wants and needs of the population. It is a social standard that helps organize and run our society. Patricia M. Huddleston says, culture is seen as an independent variable that can be manipulated through management interventions in order to achieve organizational goals. This means a group of people decides on a norm for its society and form its culture based off that norm through the acceptance of people who abide by that norm and the exclusion of people who do not. Culture is something that can help people set boundaries and judge their actions, but culture alone cannot define a group of people. New cultures usually evolve from older parent cultures. These new cultures are not identical to the parent culture. They can gain new facets and features from other cultures that they may come into contact with. It is also possible for a new culture to form as a result of a combination of more than one parent culture. Because this happens, there is no such thing as a truly unique culture. All human culture has a similar base upon which different cultures have been created. This makes humans more similar to each other than they are unique.
Culture can be something we set boundaries and norms from, but another important aspect of culture that we mentioned in our definition was understanding that culture can be observed on both a personal and group level. Culture impacts our society because of our personal and group impact. Flynn says, information underlying culture is individual specific, perhaps even time specific, but shared sufficiently to allow varying degrees of communication and mutual comprehension. This statement from Mark V. Flynn supports the idea that culture is something that defines individuals as well as the group that they are a part of. A specific culture can make one person unique from another, but the shared experiences and similarities among multiple people is what allow them to coexist and communicate.
Some believe that culture can be observed on a population or group level, such as Baldwin. Baldwin posts a new approach to culture, in that it is actually a contested zone, where different groups participate in the struggle to negotiate meaning in regards to issues relevant to them. Regarding the idea that culture only has one definition in the dictionary, this contested zone is only complicated because we make it so. Different cultures occur all the time, and as such, no two people will agree. It's like trying to make Judaism and Christianity agree on a single religion. Culture seems to be a thing that is shared between groups of people as it is an action of shared learning. The essence of having an action of culture referenced by Y be learned by X and transferred from Z in the shape of X learns Y from Z, it would be irregular for many people to simply come up with a random culture off the top of their heads. Culture had to have come from somewhere. It could have been a discovery, but not every human has the same discovery. If not spoken to of, some would never believe what they do today, as it is all in the forms of culture of how humans find as normal to fill the gap in their hollow shells. Or only observed on an individual level by a handler. When people act, they are creating new culture. No two people act exactly alike. So how can culture be shared among a group? Because of this, culture is reliant on individuals and not groups. Culture can still shape individuals and their individual lives, but is not shared by more than one individual.
It's true that culture can be observed between individuals and groups, and it's also true that it can be fluent between different groups, which is another aspect that makes it so complicated. As Foley states, today's cultures are a version of previous cultures, and while at the species level there may have been the evolution of culture, once in place we need to consider an entirely different question. Why are there so many different cultures? The answer we will propose is that cultures were and are the outcome of the way in which kin-based human communities reproduce themselves over generations, and in doing so fission. Also, while it is possible that a group's culture evolved from another group's culture, selective retention makes the new culture unique from older cultures. Selective retention means that a group of people takes different ideas, values, practices, and other things from different cultures and combine them together to form their own unique culture. They choose pieces of different cultures that they want to keep and pieces that they want to discard. After the combination process is complete, which may take multiple generations, a new culture has been formed.
While this happens in some cases, it does not happen all the time. There is evidence that culture can be strict with its boundaries, and therefore it can't intertwine with others. The diverse population of the United States is an example of this. Helena Grice claims, "There is no such thing as shared culture in the United States, because as a multilingual, multi-religious society, the United States is not and has never been held together by common cultural markers like language or religion. The formation of culture can set specific boundaries that separates groups of people, taking away the ability to intermingle and form new culture. This means that there is no such thing as an American culture. Rather, America is made up of many separate cultures. These cultures were brought to America by immigrants from all over the world. So can American culture be considered unique?"
There are many different definitions of culture. Culture is a very important aspect of human life. We should respect culture in kind ways. It's a way of life, and if we respect culture in the correct way, it can make lots of people feel welcome and kind-hearted. It can also make people unique.